Nice to see you all here. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, and warm greetings from Costa Rica. Welcome to today's webinar, which we are hosting in celebration of the 25th anniversary of the Earth Charter, which was launched on the 29th of June 2000 at the Peace Palace in The Hague. I'm Miriam Vilela. I'm the Executive Director of the Earth Charter International, and I'll be happy to host and moderate the conversation today. This session actually marks the kickoff of the Earth Charter +25 events that we are going to have over the year. And next week, many of us will gather in the Netherlands for the Earth Charter +25 conference. There's a whole group of Dutch organizers that have been working hard over the last months to put this together, and among them Alid and Paul Lubers are here with us. So today's webinar sets the tone for this important milestone. We are very pleased to be organizing today's session in collaboration with the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology, and as part of our ongoing work under the UNESCO Chair on Education for Sustainable Development that is co-hosted by the Earth Charter Center for Education for Sustainable Development and the University for Peace, which this UNESCO Chair involves education programs and research in the intersection of sustainability, education, and values with the Earth Charter. And over the years, we have been focusing on engaging and empowering young leaders, educators, schools, universities, and many institutions to use the Earth Charter, among others, to stimulate dialogue and also as a guiding ethical framework for a new possible world that we all want, a flourishing world, a flourishing Earth, planet, home. So I want to invite actually nature to be part of this conversation we're having today, maybe through our thoughts, feeling, and imagination. So let me invite you to imagine the beautiful places you like to spend in nature. Just bring it to your imagination now. The mountain, a specific mountain, the ocean, a river, a lake. And I'm just inviting us to bring this to our imagination and to our space here. A waterfall. How about a bird? The thing of a bird. How about the whales and the dolphins? The community of life. So I just wanted to bring them to this space that we are having here today and now. And just pause, because many times they are unheard, unseen, and we want to welcome nature, the nature that's outside and inside us. So we do many initiatives here at the Education Center, from Earth Charter podcasts to courses. But today, among the many initiatives, we are very excited to unveil our fifth edition, the fifth edition of the Earth Charter magazine. You'll find it in the link that we'll be sharing here. So now we are actually launching this fifth edition of the Earth Charter magazine that brings always together the voice of some Earth Charter young leaders, some Earth Charter educators, and experts, for instance, in international law. We have a wonderful article from Klaus Bosserman making the link between the concept idea of Earth trusteeship, Earth governance, and the Earth Charter, and how the Earth Charter has influenced the whole initiative around Earth trusteeship. So our goal today, and I hope you enjoyed the magazine, by the way, many of the articles in the magazine will be actually presented at the conference next week. Our goal today is to create a space for sharing reflections and exploring the Earth Charter as an instrument for advancing planetary consciousness, as an instrument for advancing ethics of care and intergenerational justice. So before we dive in, I would like to take a moment to honor the visionary leaders who more than 30 years ago envisioned the Earth Charter. And they envisioned it as a people-centered initiative, in the sense of, rather than focusing on intergovernmental negotiations, they envisioned the Earth Charter should be developed through a global, multicultural, multi-sectoral process of dialogue and consultation. And that in itself was quite unique for something that happened over 30 years ago. And these pioneers include Maurice Strong, Mikhail Gorbachev, Kamala Chaudhry from India, Wangari Maathai from Kenya, and many other members of the Earth Charter Commission, among others, but also people who got involved in the Earth Charter, such as in the Earth Charter drafting, such as Ron Engel, who is here with us, and I want to honor him too, or Brendan Mackey, among others. I also need to emphasize that since the launch of the Earth Charter in the year 2000, the Earth Charter has been embraced by individuals and organizations from around the world who have been bringing its values, its vision to life in their own context and in many different ways. So I want to honor that, the fact that the Earth Charter has inspired many to use it in different ways. And finally, let me highlight that today also marks the 80th anniversary of the UN Charter. And it marks also this 80th anniversary in a moment that the international organizations such as UN are being questioned on their value and their purpose and usefulness by many. So at these important crossroads, we need to remind ourselves of the urgent need to reaffirm our commitment to shared values in global cooperation to guide us in how we can live together in this shared beautiful planet. Now let's turn our attention to our speakers. Very happy and honored that today we have two very special guests, Stephen Rockefeller and Mary Evelyn Tucker, who have really certainly a very long history with the Earth Charter Initiative. And let me briefly introduce them. Stephen Rockefeller is a professor emeritus of religion at the Middlebury College in Vermont, where he also served as a dean of the college. Following his role as chair of the Earth Charter Drafting Committee and a member of the Earth Charter Commission, he also served for many years as a member and chair of the Earth Charter International Council. Thank you for joining us here today, Stephen. And we also have Mary Evelyn Tucker, who is co-founder and director, together with John Green, of the Forum on Religion and Ecology at the Yale University. She also has been involved in the Earth Charter for many years and served on the Earth Charter Drafting Committee during the 90s and was also a member of the Earth Charter International Council. So we are very grateful to both of you for the outstanding contributions you have made to the Earth Charter movement over the years. So if I may, I would like to start our conversation here. And I would like to start with addressing a question to Stephen. Stephen, if you could please describe to us the purpose of the Earth Charter when it was developed and launched 25 years ago, and whether you think there has been a change or addition around its purpose, especially when we look at it 25 years later. So Stephen, would like to hear your thoughts on this.
Marian, thank you very much. And it's so good to be here with you and Mary Evelyn and this whole group, and to know that the Earth Charter still has the power to bring us together and to inspire change. And as we start out here, I do want to thank both of you for the invaluable contributions you have both made to the Earth Charter Initiative over a period of 3 decades. So heartfelt thanks to you all and to all of you who have gathered here today. So let's go to this first question. What was the core purpose of the Earth Charter? And I'll make a few comments about that, and then we'll take up this second question that Marion raised. But the original core purpose of the Earth Charter can be defined like this, and this would be a short answer to Marion's question. The purpose was to set forth widely shared guiding principles for a truly sustainable way of life and to inspire inspiration of these principles in all sectors as essential to the survival and flourishing of humanity and of life on Earth. Now, the goal was to give expression to, support, and advance a worldwide planetary awakening of a new moral and spiritual consciousness occurring in the emerging global civil society. And the purpose of the consultation and drafting process that went on over a 5-year period was to tap into that emerging planetary, ethical, and spiritual consciousness that was emerging and try to crystallize the key principles. So the Earth Charter, from the very beginning, those principles in the Earth Charter had wide support, and that became increasingly evident as the Earth Charter has been endorsed by literally thousands of organizations that represent literally hundreds of millions of people. Now, protecting and restoring Earth's ecological integrity is a central concern of the Earth Charter. However, a core purpose of the document has been to make clear that the major challenges facing humanity are interrelated and cannot be resolved in isolation. The goals of ecological protection, eradication of poverty, equitable economic development, respect for human rights, democracy, and peace are interdependent and indivisible. The Earth Charter, therefore, presents an integrated, holistic ethical vision with sections on social and economic justice and on democracy, nonviolence, and peace, as well as a major section on ecological integrity. Promoting holistic thinking is one important objective of the Earth Charter. Now, there are 3 spheres of ethical concern in the emerging planetary consciousness and in the Earth Charter's ethical vision. Indira Gandhi, in an IUCN publication on IUCN's World Conservation Strategy, in 1984, identified these 3 spheres, and I quote, "We must rediscover this sense of identity with and responsibility for fellow humans, other species, and future generations." It was an especially important fundamental purpose of the Earth Charter to affirm that Earth and the greater community of life on Earth should be respected and given moral standing. The first 2 principles of the Earth Charter address this need, principles on respect and care for the community of life with understanding, compassion, and love. Now, one last point. The Earth Charter was drafted as a vision of hope for a deeply troubled world and as a call to action. And let me quote from the preamble. "The choice is ours. Form a global partnership to care for Earth and one another, or risk the destruction of ourselves and the diversity of life." All right, so that's an effort to give you a sense of the original purpose of the Earth Charter. Has that purpose changed, Marion asks. And I would say, no, it hasn't. The Earth Charter is what it is. And not only has it not changed, I think the message of the Earth Charter remains even more urgently needed today than ever, is our world has sadly turned in many unpromising directions, with an increase in war and many other negative developments. So one thing to keep in mind here is that building a just, sustainable, and peaceful world is the ultimate social and political challenge that faces humanity. And much progress has been made in that regard since World War II, with the creation of the United Nations in particular, but with many, many other developments. We were talking earlier about the significance of the formation of the European Union and the transcending all the old conflicts in Europe and the building of NATO and so forth. There are many, many examples. But we today need this vision of the Earth Charter, the vision of hope and the call to action. Now, the Earth Charter itself acknowledges that it's not being presented as the final word when it comes to this ethical and spiritual and vision. And the Earth Charter calls for deepening the dialogue and the search for truth and wisdom. So there's nothing fixed and final about the Earth Charter vision. But right now, the Earth Charter has not been replaced. And as I said, I believe the vision is as urgently needed as ever, and perhaps even more so. So it needs to be elevated, celebrated, and promoted. And I'm very grateful to Marion and all of you for taking this opportunity at the 25th anniversary to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for reminding us that the Earth Charter is a call for action, a call to action, and also hope in the midst of sometimes moments of despair. And I would also say a call for joining joint efforts and collaboration across cultures and sectors. Again, I want to acknowledge a few people who are here in the room. I just saw Christine von Weizsäcker in the room. I haven't seen Christine in a long way, many years, and Christine was also part of the drafting committee. She's joining us from Germany. Also, Ron Engel is here, and Mark Hathaway, who has written books and co-teaches with the Earth Charter. I just want to make a pause here to acknowledge we have people from Puerto Rico, work with the Earth Charter in education as an instrument in education, in universities and schools, Minuet and Maria Vilches, for instance. We have a number of people from Mexico, Mateo Castillo and many others are joining us, have joined us today. And I'll keep bringing some names here. So I'm very happy to see you. And we have a new school in the US, the Ridge Valley School, that is the first school that got the Earth Charter School seal in the US. So representatives of that are here too. So thank you for joining us. So coming back to the purpose of the Earth Charter and making this moment a reflection for us to see, and I know many of you who are joining us today here have been already using the Earth Charter in many different ways. I would like to ask Mary Evelyn Tucker to share with us your reflections on what are the critical ideas that we can find in the Earth Charter.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Stephen, for those very inspiring opening remarks and for all your work on this, and Miriam for keeping the flame alive, and so many colleagues I'd love to give shout outs to. But I'll just jump in because the key ideas, there are so many, and in rereading this to prepare for this wonderful webinar, I want to highlight 5 points that are actually from the second paragraph of the preamble, which is Earth, our home. And I think there's no other international document that has this combination, this confluence of not only ideas, but synergy. So it's universe, it's Earth, it's evolution, it's ecology, and common home. So let me just say something about each of these. So the universe context is indispensable for our moment. And the paragraph that begins with humanity is part of an evolving universe. This changes everything, as we know. This is what Thomas Berry brought into our consciousness. We're part of a vast evolving universe. And that moves us directly to a living Earth community, that there's a planetary consciousness and conscience that's emerging in this charter. Because the lines, Earth, our home, is alive with a unique community of life. This was when indigenous peoples at the Rio +5 conference in '97 said, for the first time, our worldview is included in an international document. Earth is alive. The evolutionary perspective, too, is absolutely unique. The sense that we are part of deep time, of 9 billion years of universe time, 4.6 billion years of Earth time, and that Earth has provided the conditions essential to life's evolution. Those came from the scientists. The conditions of life come out of this evolutionary deep time. And that leads to the ecological perspective, which is so resonant throughout this document. The quote is this: resilience of the community of life and the well-being of humanity depend on preserving a healthy biosphere with all its ecological systems, a rich variety of plants and animals. Resilience of all these ecosystems is essential to the well-being and health of people and planet. And the other huge idea, I think, is our common concern. Our common concern for the planet itself is a sacred trust. Again, I come back to this language, which so many of you helped draft. A sacred trust, that is unheard of in the academic world, and yet how essential it is. Thomas Berry's last work, this is a sacred universe. We need the language that brings in our spiritual concerns, our ethical consciousness, but especially that we're in an embodied, unfolding, dynamic universe. So these are the key ideas, I think, that are unique to this document: universe context, living Earth community, evolutionary perspective, ecological resilience, and our common home is a sacred trust.
Thank you, Mary Evelyn, and thank you for reminding us and highlighting this notion of Earth community, our connection with the universe. The fact that this Earth is alive was reflected clearly in the Earth Charter, and this invitation for us to imagine, think, and feel that it's the sacredness of life and Earth, and that we are part of this universe. Thank you. Stephen, we would like to hear from you. What do you think are the critical ideas we can find in the Earth Charter?
Well, I have always been moved by the words, we're one human family and one Earth community with a common destiny. And that we're all in this together. And that sense of interdependence, I mean, fits with just what Mary Evelyn was describing and talking about, and is one of the foundations of this whole ethical vision. But a couple other thoughts. I want to also note that unlike, I think, almost any other international document done by international lawyers and so forth, the Earth Charter offers a set of spiritual values. And the first Earth Charter meeting I went to was chaired by Mohammed Sanoun. And in the course of that meeting, Ambassador Sanoun said that he wanted not only universal ethical principles, he wanted to see a document with universal spiritual principles. That's what convinced me to join the initiative, that they really wanted to go deep and grapple with what is perhaps the underlying problem in the world today. We live in a culture dominated by reason, science, and technology. But without spirituality and ethics, reason, science, and technology can be used for good or evil. And they've put extraordinary powers of both creation and destruction into human hands. And we need the ethical and spiritual dimension. So I make that point. And one other thing I want to stress. One of the first conversations we had on the drafting committee was how to name the planet. How do we refer to the planet? Do we refer to the planet as the Earth with a small e, which suggests that it exists as a stage for human history and just a collection of resources? Or do we refer to it as Earth using the planet's name? And there was a scientist at the meeting, a cosmologist, who said, look, scientists refer to the Earth using its name. They don't call it the Earth, they call it Earth. We don't talk about the Mars. Now, why is it so important to use the name Earth? I think one reason for using the name Earth is it evokes the image of Earth photographed by the astronauts, which awakens awe, wonder, and a sense of the mystery of this whole cosmic unfolding that Mary Evelyn has described and that we're part of. So I urge all of you, if you're journalists, philosophers, scientists, talk about Earth, and don't use the Earth with a capital E, because that's just a kind of middle way between the Earth with a little e and the name Earth. So I share those thoughts with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephen. And that particular story helps us to see the richness of discussions that went through the drafting process, and also to understand the reason why there's a capital E in the Earth Charter and without the before. And Stephen, thank you for highlighting, constantly highlighting the importance of one of the special ingredients that the Earth Charter brings is that it highlights the importance of ethical and spiritual dimension. And when I heard you now speak, it came to my mind that famous quote that people say comes from Aristotle, that educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. And I think that's one of the things that really nurtures the work we do here, with bringing the Earth Charter as an instrument to education.
You're absolutely right. And let me just share one other story that some of you have heard, but some of you may not know. There was a big push to get the Earth Charter to refer to the Creator or to God. But the drafting committee realized very quickly that there are lots of humanists who don't use the word God, and there are even some religious traditions like Buddhism that don't use the term God, and it would be inappropriate. But we had many conversations around this. And one of the conversations I had in the Pantanal with Leonardo Boff, the theologian who is a member of the Earth Charter Commission, was exactly about this. And Marion was helping translate it because he didn't speak English very well and my French wasn't very good. But we were able to communicate, and we both came finally to realize that one solution was to refer to reverence for the mystery of being. And the mystery of being can be interpreted theologically or naturalistically. It's a mystery. And how you want to interpret is up to you. And yet it brings that dimension of reverence for what is at the core of this extraordinary universe of which we are an interdependent part. And if you will, each one of us and everything is both a unique individual and a manifestation of the totality. And reverence is an orientation that humanity needs. And it's very much linked to what Mary Evelyn was talking about when she talked about the sacredness of life and the sacredness of the universe. So reverence for the mystery of being. And of course, the Earth Charter refers to a number of spiritual values, including compassion and love.
Thank you, Stephen. Living with reverence for the mystery of being. Thank you for telling us the story behind that particular articulation of words there in the preamble of the Earth Charter.
Yes.
Now, Mary Evelyn, we would like to hear your thoughts on ecological civilization and whether you think that the Earth Charter can be used as a guide or as an ethical foundation for building an ecological civilization. And this question, of course, comes within the context of the many travels you have had, been going to China and different groups that have been organizing around the narrative, building the narrative around ecological civilization. So what are your thoughts on how we could link the Earth Charter with the narrative or the idea around building an ecological civilization?
Well, thank you for that huge question. Yes, of course, we can develop an ethics of care, comprehensive compassion, and so on. But I want to just give some background before speaking directly about ecological civilization. And that is, we've been needing an ethics such as the Earth Charter for a long, long time. And why is that? Because we've had from the world's religions and even philosophies, human ethics, and that is absolutely necessary, and yet it's not sufficient for our moment and for our challenges. Of course, we haven't even realized the ethics that we've developed in these various traditions, but a broader environmental ethics is needed. We don't have that. We don't have a response to climate change. We don't have a response to biodiversity loss, even pollution. We are in need of an ethics that brings the human and ecology together. And that's what the Earth Charter offers. I see this, frankly, in the split of our two schools at Yale. The Divinity School is about human ethics and social justice. The School of the Environment, the oldest school in our country, has been all about nature and the environment, but not about humans. So that split is very fundamental. And it's a problem we need to recognize that the Earth Charter has overcome. I want to just highlight, too, what preceded the Earth Charter. If we take the United Nations World Charter of Nature, which came out in '82, these are principles of conservation. Thomas Berry loved this document. It's a beautiful document, and it highlights nature. Now, I have to also say 111 countries endorsed that, passed it, 18 abstained, 1 did not refuse to endorse it, and that was the US in 1982. Now, we move forward with a declaration of a global ethic from the Parliament of World Religions in 1993 that was drafted by Hans Küng, a German theologian. Pretty much drafted by one person with a little bit of consultation. The difference here, again, it was human focused, and it didn't have the consultation of civil society that developed over 4 years plus in the actual drafting. So it needed 25 years later to be amended by a 5th directive, which was for a culture of sustainability and a care for the earth. But this began completely with human-centered ethics. Now, we also have a Charter of Compassion from Karen Armstrong, which is marvelous. Compassion is clearly needed. Again, human-centered. The nature is not even included, and this is why the context of the Earth Charter is so important. We have many other global ethics that have been developing since that time. But again, the Earth Charter is scientifically inclusive in all the principles I just named earlier on. International law, Ron Engels has helped with that, and others, Klaus Wasserman, but it has world religions and philosophical ethics as well, that in the Harvard conferences 30 years ago, we were trying to say we need the environmental ethics from all the world's religions. And every conference ended with looking at the draft of the Earth Charter. And Stephen came to many of these. So how could we begin to integrate these traditions of nature valuing that needed to come into this modern challenge of an ecological crisis? So this brings us to ecological civilization, which is, I think, one of the most important planetary ideas, which certainly has a very dynamic dialogical potential with the Earth Charter. And we saw that at Rollins College last year with how can ecological civilization infuse education along with the Earth Charter. So in China, this has developed over 30 years, just a little bit longer than the Earth Charter, but 30 years they've been thinking about how can we focus industrial development and modernization into an ecologically not just sustainable, but flourishing future. That's the move here. And it's a fascinating thing to begin to get a feeling for that, because in 2018, this went into the Chinese constitution, and it brings together in an integrated way material and spiritual civilization, these are the words, along with social, political, and ecological civilization. Imagine, there's nowhere in the West that brings all these stakeholders into a very powerful dialogue for a new kind of civilization. And indeed, there's almost no place on the earth with a 5,000-year-old civilization that can think on that level. And I would say, as you know, the most important country for the future of the planet is China. So this sensibility that has principles drawing on their own traditions, especially of Confucianism, a communitarian ethics that includes the earth, and many practices that are already developing of reforestation, of protecting wetlands and so on. Beijing is a city of 49% green, forested canopy, which has been developed over these last several decades. It's astonishing, and something to be known more here. So the Earth Charter can be in dialogue with ecological civilization for sure, with its expanded planetary ethics. And I just want to conclude with these 3 points, these three, the tripod of the Earth Charter: ecology, social and economic justice, democracy, nonviolence, and peace. This is the most comprehensive ethical framework that we have in this particular moment. Ecological integrity. We can't do anything if the ecosystems go down. Social and economic justice, that the human economy is a subsystem of nature's economy, which Barry said over and over again. And that democracy, nonviolence, and peace needs to be fostered institutionally and personally. The Gandhian spirit of Kamala Chowdhury was absolutely essential. And Barry would say there can be no peace among humans without peace for the earth. This is remarkable. And I have to say, it switched the World Council of Churches' priority of justice, peace, and the integrity of creation. No, it said the earth is the living foundation for everything. And that's the great contribution of the Earth Charter that will be very rich in dialogue with the Chinese view of their triad of universe, earth, and human, that we are co-creators with this process. So I could say lots more, but there's immense potential for this dialogue with ecological civilization in China and beyond, for sure.
Yes, thank you, Mary Evelyn Tucker. And we see you making a bridge between East and West thoughts around ecological civilization, and we very much hope you'll continue to take I would say, a bridge role or leadership role in building that bridge between East and West thinking about this narrative around ecological civilization, but also bringing their charter as an instrument to help guide or offer the ethical foundations for that. And thank you for articulating it so well in terms of looking at their charter as one of the most comprehensive instruments to guide that effort. I see this as an incredible opportunity that's currently going on in the building of this narrative around ecological civilization, because it gives us a vision to collaborate and work together. And I do want to bring in the Earth Charter movement to think together about how to envision an ecological civilization using the Earth Charter as an instrument and collaborate with East and West.
So I know
Okay.
Stephen wants to say something
Yeah,
here,
please.
and then I'll make one quick comment. Stephen, go ahead.
Stephen?
So I was just going to say that I want to recommend Mary Evelyn's 2-volume study with Du Wei Ming on Confucian spirituality. If you want to explore further where Mary Evelyn is coming from in terms of her background in Confucian studies. Confucian spirituality is quite fascinating, and there's been a deep dialogue with American philosophers, particularly philosophers influenced by John Dewey, with the Confucian tradition. But Mary Evelyn's 2-volume study is just a marvel.
Well, you're very kind. I wanted just to add that the idea of ecological civilization, while originating in China and inspired by Confucian ideas for sure, but is also now passing to the West. So there are many people trying to, consider this. What does this mean? It's not just a Chinese idea. And that's what's exciting that I think Miriam's also referring to. Thank you, Stephen.
Yes, totally. And given that Stephen mentioned about Confucianism, I just want to bring in this something that Stephen also wrote in one of the articles he has, one of the chapters he has, I think, in the book Responsibility, that he brings this conversation that Tu Weiming brought into one of their charter drafting meetings that I think links the Earth Charter and Confucianism. And I remember well that he said the Earth Charter should reflect this idea of our relationship with ourselves, with people in the community, earth and heaven. So there was even a drawing made during the drafting committee when he brought this idea that I understand comes from Confucianism philosophy, but maybe the philosophy also of other traditions, but it's clearly, I would say, reflected in the Earth Charter. So thank you for bringing that, Stephen. I was just further elaborating on that.
Well, that's absolutely true, Marian. And I have used Du Wei Ming's diagram, which comes from the Confucian tradition. I mean, imagine a bullseye, and at the center of the bullseye is the self. And each ring going out, you start with the family and the local community and larger communities, then the nation, then the world community, then the entire natural world, out into the vast universe. And there's a cross that lies across the bullseye. And the cross from right to left is the self and the community, that the self finds itself in relation to all these communities of which it is a part. And the vertical part of the cross at the top is the ethical, the spiritual, the transcendent, and at the bottom is the human and the material and this world. And they are interconnected. But it's a very powerful symbol, actually, that's very consistent with the vision in the Earth Charter. So you're absolutely right about that, Marian. And I want to say one other thing very quickly, following up on Mary Evelyn's remarks, because the Earth Charter culminates with the principle of peace. And it defines peace as right relationship with oneself, with others, with other cultures, with the larger world of nature, and if you will, the mystery of being. The point being made by putting it last is you need all these other ethical principles to be fulfilled in order to arrive at peace. And peace is thought of in these relational terms. And I think that's, again, an important contribution of the Earth Charter that fits in with a lot of what Mary Evelyn was saying.
I just want to say, Confucianism is very inspiring and inspired. It's yet not fully known in the West, but just to pick up on Stephen's point, anytime I teach Confucianism, it's ripples in a pond of these concentric circles, because the cultivation, the moral spiritual cultivation of the person in relationality affects everything, including the cosmos, the earth, and the human, which we complete by our creative contribution to a common good. This is communitarian morality, spirituality, but creativity. And that's the power of this tradition, that it offers a contrast to hyper-individuality. And that's the spirit of the Earth Charter in a very powerful spiritual way.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary Evelyn. It's good for us to think about ourselves in community with others. I appreciate that. So for the 25th anniversary of the Earth Charter, we have thought of the role the Earth Charter has had over the past 25 years as an instrument that fosters planetary consciousness. So as an instrument that is there with the purpose to expand and deepen our planetary consciousness, our ethics of care, and in understanding of intergenerational justice. And the reason that we thought of using that title for our Charter Conference and the 25th anniversary is because we see this as essential concerns for the 21st century to expand our planetary consciousness, ethics of care, and intergenerational justice. So, Stephen, we would like to hear your thoughts on how you see these linkages or emphasis between the Earth Charter and planetary consciousness and the importance of ethics of care to the current times.
Yeah. Well, I think to put an emphasis on planetary consciousness and it's a planetary ethical and spiritual consciousness that particularly interests me, but it's important to see what's happening on the planet in this regard. All of the great traditions or great civilizations, and I would go back and say indigenous traditions, as well as the great world civilizations, have produced their own distinctive ethical and spiritual consciousness. And they've all been geographically located. But what is happening today is a planetary civilization, a world community is trying to be born. It's fractured, divided, filled with war and violence and all kinds of tension right now. But this is what is trying to happen. And as I said, it's humanity's ultimate social and political challenge. And this new planetary consciousness, Marion, that you're talking about, is what is the product of the emergence of this planetary civilization that's trying to take form. And it's science and technology and industrialization has made it possible, but it's now trying to generate its own spiritual awareness and ethical awareness. And humanity's ultimate destiny is to be the mind of the biosphere and to be the guardian of the biosphere. And that's what this planetary consciousness, I think, is all about. And it's awakening in many people around the world, and they may not even be fully aware of what's happening. But the Earth Charter, it was a major attempt to give it expression, put it into words, put it out there, and this can advance the development of it. But we have to get there, because if we don't, given the destructive power humanity has now with atomic weapons, biological weapons, with just the sheer mass of industrialization, we have the capacity to destroy ourselves. So this is really very, very important. And to put your finger on the ethics of care, I mean, that's exactly right. And you know, you can talk about care in different ways, but the Earth Charter sort of spells out what care includes. And one of the principles that I particularly have been moved by is recognize the ignored, protect the vulnerable, serve those who suffer, and enable them to develop their capacities and to pursue their aspirations. The final analysis, I mean, that's where we've got to get, and we're a long way from it. Anyway, that maybe wasn't the clearest explanation, but I think you get the drift of what I'm saying.
Definitely.
Thank you, Stephen. Mary Evelyn, your thoughts on this?
Well, just to build on what Stephen said, yes, the Earth Charter is essential for the 21st century with all the caveats that Stephen just made, because there's no future without a shared future. No future is possible without a shared future. There's no viable human presence without the Earth community. Again, this is essential to the Earth Charter. So we're moving from this planetary consciousness to planetary conscience, the sense of responsibility, not just rights for the human, but rights of nature, rights, responsibility for all future generations. So there's problems and promise. Yes, we're in the midst of a major struggle. We can say it's a breakdown to break through. But I do think this ethics of care, this expansion of compassion with the consent, I had this in my notes, to the concentric circles that Stephen so beautifully has developed, from the individual to the community. But I just want to say how this is already in our world's traditions. Indigenous people, all our relatives, we are kin. And this is a moment when finally Indigenous voices, worldviews, and traditional environmental knowledge is being valued. And all of that's in the Charter. The traditional environmental knowledge and practices are referred to over and over again, as well as their spiritual worldviews. Buddhism, that Stephen knows so well, and also is referred to, the interbeing of Thich Nhat Hanh, is on fire around the world. His book, Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet, and the courses that they're doing are exactly this at Plum Village, interbeing, so consonant with the Charter. And, you know, I just want to lift up Confucianism and Taoism because they share a worldview that is a continuity of being, not radical otherness or transcendence of God out there. The universe, the earth, and human are in one dynamic flow. And that's a cosmological worldview indispensable for our future because we are the mind and heart. That's one character, the thinking and feeling capacity of this huge system to create with and contribute to its future. So just a final point on intergenerational justice, which is also so crucial. We like to say to our students, here's an intergenerational handshake. And we've been surprised how that somehow catches. We'll give you an intergenerational hug, but the handshake is really very interesting. And I'm very struck in going recently to the Michael Rockefeller wing at the Metropolitan that the Rockefeller family and Stephen's brother has kept alive this power of indigenous worldviews. I was dumbfounded walking in there. I felt I knew almost nothing. But these beautiful artifacts created out of wood that have lasted have this vibrating sense of the ancestors are with us. The land is speaking, and we are ritualizing this intergenerational sensibility. I've never seen anything as powerful as this sensibility right there in this artwork. So I think We are calling on our ancestors. Every religious tradition has a sense of revering the dead and the spirits. But we're calling on the ancestors for the present to continue their work and for future generations who will inherit the possibilities and promise of the Earth Charter.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And thank you for bringing the worldviews of indigenous people. Actually, I have been thinking that one of our next webinars should be bringing the voices of various indigenous peoples from different countries and places to dialogue about their worldviews and their linkages with their charter. Thank you
I just want to say
for
that
bringing that.
Sorry, that wing everyone is recognizing is bringing into world consciousness the significance of indigenous worldviews and arts and spirituality. That's a watershed moment. Very, very special.
Thank you. So we are coming to the last question that we're engaging our guest speakers here before we open for comments and Q&A. And we'll invite Mary Evelyn to first come to the floor in sharing her reflections on that. It has to do with education. So over the past 20 years, the work at the Earth Charter International and our education center has focused on education, in looking at how the different ways in which we look at the futures of education, also education for sustainable development, the importance of global citizenship education, and how to position or bring in the Earth Charter as an instrument into all of this. So, Mary Evelyn, in a world facing the challenges of climate change, the growing geopolitical tensions, I don't know how we cannot look at the role of education. Our question is, how do you think we should envision the futures of education and the role the Earth Charter can play in it?
Such an important question, isn't it? And the conference last year that you organized and Michael Bracken was behind was extraordinary in so many ways. Absolutely fabulous. And Peter Blaise has been thinking about this forever. Now, I want to begin with this sense that in our lifetime, this is very hopeful, our historical perspective has broadened, has shifted, has become more inclusive. My grandfather, Carlton Hayes, taught European history at Columbia for 50 years. He went there undergraduate and graduate, chaired the department and so on. But he came back from being ambassador to Spain in the Second World War with this sense of we have got to create the grounds for peace in our educational system. And he and other colleagues at Columbia developed the Western civilization curriculum, which has had a huge impact there. Now, Ted DeBerry, his student and my mentor in the Asian traditions, he went to China with Thomas Berry in 48. He had come out of the Pacific War. He had learned Japanese and the Chinese languages. He came back to Columbia along with his colleagues like Donald Keene and others in Japanese literature, and they established the best Asian studies programs, I think, in the country. It's now spread across, reading the classical texts and so on. So out of 2 world wars, we began to expand our curriculum and include other parts of the world. And that developed even further into world history, which I taught at Iona when I came out of Columbia. World history just blew my mind, what these people were doing with all parts of the world, seeing it as a whole. And that developed even further to big history, which people have developed, including the universe story and then human history. That's happened in our lifetime. That is amazing. That is in the educational systems. Now, I would say that we take that large expansion of history all the way to universe history, and we say then we can't have an education just for individual moralizing or personal salvation and so on, but we need this communitarian ethics. The Declaration of Independence is a fantastic move out of an authoritarian sensibility and governance in Europe. But we need a declaration of interdependence, of communitarian ethics of responsibility to the Earth community, the living Earth community. And we need to educate not just for a job, for economic gain, but for ecological health, for people and the planet. And this means we need eco-economics and eco-justice, which has also developed over the last 20 years. Many, many people thinking about this shift in economics. And finally, we need a politics, not just for wealth and individual power, but for the commonwealth, the commonwealth. And I would say in this breakdown moment, with incredible suffering, with incredible, Stephen's reference to that beautiful passage of those who suffer and the vulnerable, etc. There is a spiritual longing for a discovery of the common good, of the commonwealth that includes the whole Earth community. And that is what the Earth Charter offers and will be a foundational part of the education of the future. So, new history, broad history, ecological economics, a politics for the commonwealth, and a declaration of interdependence for future generations.
Great. Well, thank you. There's so much we could think of in all of this. Thank you. Stephen, your thoughts on education, the future, how you envision the futures of education, the importance of education in helping us to understand and address the current challenges and the role the Earth Charter can play in it.
Yes, I mean, education lays the foundation for human development in every culture, every nation. It's absolutely critical. And one of the more promising movements, I think, in the US and in many other countries is a growing emphasis on education of the whole child, body, mind, and heart. And the Dalai Lama has made a major point of emphasizing the critical need to educate the heart along with the mind. And as I said earlier, we live in a culture where the dominant influence is reason, science, and technology needs to be counterbalanced with an education of the heart. And so how do you do that? There's a lot of creative work going on in this area, including on how to nurture spiritual development, pointing out that everybody's born with an innate capacity for spiritual development, and it can be nurtured both within and outside the framework of religion. And Professor Lisa Miller's work is a very good, at Teachers College, Columbia University is a very good example of that. The Earth Charter can be used as an instrument for engaging this discussion and bringing ethics into the classroom and raising a lot of these very, very critical issues. So I think that the Earth Charter as a teaching tool is extremely important. I also think that one of the most important developments when historians reflect on the second half of the 20th century is going to be the extensive constructive work that was done in developing a global ethic, shared values for the world community that can provide, as the Earth, in the language of the Earth Charter, a foundation for human development in constructive ways. And the Earth Charter is a critical part of that. And I think every school ought to be teaching the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Charter of the United Nations, any number of other documents that are critical, like the World Charter for Nature and the Earth Charter. And let me just say one, because we were talking earlier about the World Charter for Nature. It is a beautiful document, and it is the first international document to talk about giving all life forms moral standing and consideration. However, what happened, even though most governments voted for it, they all walked away from it. And if you look for a reference on the World Charter for Nature in the report of the World Commission on Environment and Development that produced our common future, you won't find it. If you look in the documents that were issued by the Rio Earth Summit, you won't find any reference to the World Charter for Nature, if I'm correct. So the governments got very nervous about a set of moral values that could lead to a deepening sense of the rights of nature and that could be restrictive. And so governments backed away from it. And what the Earth Charter Initiative was partly designed to do, and I tried to make this point, one of its major purposes was to bring this right back into the center of attention and get the World Charter for Nature's principle articulated and developed. Now, one problem with the World Charter, it was issued in 1982 before the concept of sustainable development had been fully developed, which took place in the 1987 report, Our Common Future, which is a marvelous document. It's a marvelous document, and it has a few hints of the moral standing of non-human species. There are a few passages you have to search through with a magnifying glass to find them, but they're there, just a few. But what the Earth Charter did is mainstream all of that. And that's what drove a lot of us initially to really want to stick with the Earth Charter, and I think inspired Maurice Strong, who had been Secretary General of the Earth Summit, and deeply regretted the fact that they couldn't come together on an Earth Charter, the nations, at the Rio Earth Summit. Anyway, I think the history of the development of global ethics is something I don't know that anybody teaches it. Maybe they do somewhere. There are probably courses on international law that cover it. But all students, beginning in elementary school, should read the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and have a chance to read at least parts of the Earth Charter. And so, Marian, I encourage you in your wonderful work with UNESCO to keep going with all of that. And I think it's just terrific in that partnership. UNESCO has endorsed the Earth Charter twice. The UN General Assembly hasn't endorsed the Earth Charter, but it has never endorsed a document it didn't write. And that's understandable. But UNESCO has, and that's a very, very important partnership. So, and I think that if you're interested in education of the whole child, the Earth Charter can be helpful. And let me just say this, a lot of young people today are struggling with depression and anxiety and serious mental illness. And they need hope, they need a vision that is promising, and they need support for the education of the heart.
Yeah, I just want to mention Peter Blaise Corcoran has done so much for education in the Earth Charter, and also his book, Earth Charter in Action, I think is really an amazing resource. So just a footnote there.
Well,
Thank
you. Yeah.
So it's actually very timing. Thank you, Mary Evelyn and Stephen. I want to now bring to the floor anybody who would like to make a comment or a question. I want to let you know, Stephen and Mary Evelyn, that Johanna Burston is here. She, among others, Sam Crowell, for instance, made a comment, the sacred is part of the human experience when you're talking about the sacredness of life. Mark Hathaway, who is joining us from Canada, said, I think my students, when they consider the Earth Charter, are often very moved by the language of reverence that we find in the Earth Charter. Mateo Castillo, who is also here, he actually makes a comment, but also I think he asked a question, what role can the Earth Charter play in building a new civilizational paradigm based on peace, justice, and sustainability? So anyway, I just wanted to bring the voice of a few people that are here, some. And Peter, would you like to share some comments?
Oh my goodness, thank you, Marian. It's certainly a joy to be back in Professor Rockefeller and Professor Tucker's class again. What a wonderful summary. I'm daunted to even comment, Marion, but I appreciate your asking, and I'll just make a couple of points. First of all, I salute and acknowledge you three bodhisattvas for your work, keeping it going all these years. We've had such challenges organizationally, and the challenges in the world are so great. And the Earth Charter feels very alive at this moment for all of us here, I'm sure. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to also just bring forward, and I appreciate your question so much, Marion, about education. I think we made a wise decision to focus our limited resources on education. And I think that through these eras of environmental education and education for sustainable development, education for ecological civilization, the values of the Earth Charter for education endure, whatever is the trend. And the process of the Earth Charter, the content of the Earth Charter, the inspiration and aspiration that the Earth Charter provides are still a very good answer to the great question of educational philosophy. What is the educated person? So I think its relevance, what could be a better foundation than the Earth Charter for, as you call it at the conference, education for ecological and ethical literacy. The other thing I wanted to say is thank you for bringing the mountains and the waterfalls and the waves, the whales in. For that book on ecological civilization, I wrote an article with Karen Malone in which we argue in favor of the educational values embedded in the Earth Charter for what we call embodied wisdom, what Stephen calls the education of the heart. You know, that we need to know and love the earth from the perspective of our own bodies, and we talk about indigenous ecological spiritualities in that context, and Stephen's term world affirming spirituality. So I think just to say that education, pardon me, for ecological civilizations is going to be very well advanced by the Earth Charter. And if I may share one more thing that I hadn't planned to, Marion, but I'm inspired by Mary Evelyn's selection of particular words and reminding us of the importance. And some of you will remember, and that wonderful book I did with Alida and Marion as well. It wasn't just my book, but in the foreword, Wangari Maathai talks about how sometimes she liked to just sit and take a word or two from the Earth Charter and reflect upon it. And I loved that you did that, Mary Evelyn, and I'll share what I do, and others may be interested to try it. But I do what in the Christian tradition is called Lectio Divina practice, where you take the text of the Earth Charter and read and reread, reflect, pray if you pray, allow the spirit of the language. I don't think it's an exaggeration for most of us here to think of the Earth Charter as a sacred text. And things can arise from that practice. And it's not just, of course, in the Christian tradition, in the Hindu tradition and Muslim tradition. Close reading of text can be very deep and inspiring. So that has helped me a great deal in related work that I'm doing in indigeneity. Wonder is my new passionate research project. And so those are just a few reflections, and thank you for this wonderful webinar.
Thank you, Peter. So good to hear you. Let me bring some of the questions that are in the Q&A here. One maybe for Stephen or Mary Evelyn, if you want to comment. It comes from Simon T. Sehurt. I think Simon is from WEAL, the Wellbeing Economic Alliance. And he's saying, basically, when analyzing why we are unable to implement such a comprehensive set of human and planetary ethical principles, it seems much of it comes back to our economic systems, patterns of production and consumptions, exploitation and extraction from nature. So if you could speak more to how a shift in our economic systems could help us put the Earth Charter into practice. Would you like to comment on that? Maybe Stephen first, and then Mary Evelyn, if you want. So the question is like looking at the problem of economic systems and the importance of shifting our economic systems to new ones. And of course, this is the work of the Well-Being Economic Alliance.
Yes, well, the economic system is fundamental, and as Thomas Berry to addressing the ecological issues that we face and to many social problems. And you do have in Section 2 under ecological integrity a number of principles there, including number 6, which is prevent harm as the best method of environmental protection. And that's sometimes called the golden rule of environmental ethics. And that needs to be taken very seriously by business people and our systems of production and consumption. And Principle 7 says adopt patterns of production, consumption, and reproduction that safeguard Earth's regenerative capacities, human rights, and community well-being. I mean, that's the broad issue, safeguarding Earth's regenerative capacities. Now, certainly values are communicated to young people by our system of production and consumption. And when we ignore these basic principles of the Earth Charter, including the precautionary principle, the message to young people is they're not important. So you're absolutely right if you're suggesting that changes in the economic system can also have a very positive influence on ethics and vice versa. So you've raised a very important issue.
Thank you. Do you want to comment on that?
Very, very quickly, because I'd love to hear some other questions. You know, we have in the last 20 plus years had some pretty significant developments in corporate social responsibility and responsible investment and so on and so forth. And, you know, calling our financial system, our banks and insurance companies to responsible action regarding climate change. And I want to also say that the religious communities have been very active in this, and the divestment movement that Bill McKibben and others really helped to spur on. You know, there's like $40 trillion, I believe is the amount of divestment from not socially responsible companies and so on. And the Rockefeller brothers led that some years back as well. And my understanding is at least, I think more than a third of those divestments are from religious communities. So there's a moral force here. There's foundations like the Rockefeller brothers. There are communities that have developed these socially responsible ways forward. And even though they're eroding at this moment, they are there, they are to be drawn on, and they will be revived, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Simon, for bringing that question. We appreciate a lot the work of the Well-Being Economic Alliance. And Earth Charter International is also part of that alliance, by the way, in support of that effort. So there's a question from Kayala Mamadova. She's asking about intergenerational ethics in curriculum. Are today's education systems preparing youth to handle future climate realities responsibly? That's a hard one.
Yeah.
Are today's educational system preparing youth to handle future climate realities in a responsible manner?
See Peter shaking his head. I think this is a really important question. You know, I mean, the international IPCC report was always worried about adaptation and mitigation for climate change. You know, we're well beyond that because the scientific community was giving out facts and figures and models, but not action, because their duty, they felt, was to contribute to policy, but not make transformative or even ethical comments possible, which one can respect on the one hand, but has also led to a lot of delays. And I think this notion that the moral force, even in our scientific studies, needs to come forward because the next generation is at a loss when things are unraveling so quickly. But I would say we have students at the School of the Environment, one of whom lived through Sandy, the Hurricane Sandy, and he has become a huge advocate for climate refugees because he was one. We have another one who was in the fires of Pacifica, I believe it is Paradise in California. And she has become a huge climate advocate. So what I admire most in this generation is they are ferocious and tenacious, and their experience with issues of climate, of pollution. Many of them have already suffered from cancer, and they are still working on transformation for the environment and for human well-being. So I think there's resilience and hope there, even with all that is going on.
Thank you. One more, and I will ask maybe if anyone else would like to make a comment. So, for instance, Johanna Burstyn is here. Just want to give you maybe the floor if you want to make a comment or ask a question. But let me bring you one from John Green. I think he's asking a question about planetary consciousness, the term planetary consciousness. So he says, while along with many others, I find planetary consciousness exceedingly helpful as a phrase oriented towards mutually enhancing relations with the larger Earth community, yet some form of oppressive, even fascist cooptation of planetary language. So he's having a difficulty with I understand, planetary language. How can we guard against that usage of the concept of planetary consciousness, which holds such promise? So as far as I understand, John Green is perceiving the word planetary, or the language around planetary language, fascist in is that what I'm understanding, Mary Evelyn?
Yes, I think so. And, you know, I think we've come from global, which seems a little more abstract than planetary. So I think that's one of John's points why we like it better. But all these terms can be co-opted. It's true. And I think planetary, though, keeps us close to the biological. And the biological, the living Earth community, is the essence, I think, of the breath of life, of the reverence for this mystery of being. So if we continue to offer that language that's biologically rich, soil fecund, I think we can keep that from being co-opted. And I just want to mention that we're about to lift up a Living Earth Community website, which has a bibliography of 300 pages of annotated resources on this movement that is saying Earth is alive, that's so essential to the Earth Charter. And I think this sensibility it's healing. Someone from Bioneers who we talked to last week, he felt this notion of a living Earth community may be one of the most important foundational movements of the future for civilization. So the healing of our planetary connection, I think, is absolutely essential. And that's what the Earth Charter has at its heart. We are interdependent, interbeing, in a very biologically rich way with all these living Earth systems.
Thank you, Mary Evelyn. Someone already made a question here in the chat box. How can we get a copy of this bibliography?
It will be
Chelsea
lifted up
Master.
in the fall. The whole web, it's a huge website, Living Earth Community website. So we'll let you know.
And I want to just push for some clarification about the concern with the term planetary consciousness. I mean, is the concern that that environmental groups will try to impose this on people? I mean, that would obviously be inconsistent with the keeping of the spirit of the whole environmental movement to adopt an aggressive approach toward language and start trying to cancel people for using the wrong word and so forth. I mean, is that what the concern is? What is the concern with planetary?
Yeah, I was also trying to understand, Stephen. That comes from John Green. And John, my thought in planetary consciousness is expanding our consciousness to see the whole and our part within the whole planet, not only the planet, even the universe. But it seems that, yeah, I cannot really understand the question. I was trying to get John Green in so that he can further clarify his question or his concern. But
there is a backlash today against globalization.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether because of the impact on loss of manufacturing jobs in the developed world as well as other issues. So right now, I mean, the anti-globalism movement is out there, and it may not like this emphasis on planetary consciousness, and certainly populist nationalism and authoritarian leaders, I'm sure, are not much interested in talking about planetary consciousness. But I think it's just, using the word planetary is just talking about the human awareness of our interconnectedness with this totality. And I mean, again, it goes back to that notion of we're one human family and one Earth community with a common destiny. And planetary consciousness means you're beginning to get that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I would be interested if anybody can clarify why the term is problematical. But I can see, you know, maybe in response to the hostility to globalization,
yeah.
Well, I think I just asked John to clarify that in the chat, but I also think there. Let's just say Germany, before the Second World War, had this sense of green folk traditions, which was used by the Nazis, and so on. And we had a colleague at Bucknell who came running into our office. You know, this green consciousness and so on can be co-opted by other forces. And I think that's partly what he's saying. But I think that the planetary sensibility, as you've just said, Stephen, is it's efficacious, and I think it will continue to be something that brings us together as one human family.
Yeah. So John Green put something on the comment on the comments, the chat box on this. He says planetary is an appropriate term and has traction internationally. My question is to activate awareness of cooptation of the term by political forces.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah.
So I think you you answered that, I guess, already. Okay, friends, we are coming to an end of our conversation. I don't know if anyone else would like to raise your hand and make a comment or question. So, Johanna Bernstein, if you can open your mic. We'd love to hear you. And Alide. Yeah, Johanna first.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And it's so wonderful to see Stephen and Mary Evelyn and Peter and Alida, people who I've had the great honor of collaborating with, and just towering intellects and enormous hearts and minds and souls. I just wanted to come in very quickly and share with you some reflections about how I feel the Earth Charter has such an important role to play in the current climate negotiations. And, you know, over the last 30 years, since the very first climate UN negotiation in Berlin, there's been an evolution, and then I could say a bit of a de-evolution and a bit of a retreat. There are three ways that I think the Earth Charter can be a very powerful grounding force. And the first is the underlying ethic of respect and care. And I take the words from Stephen Rockefeller that the ethical life begins with an attitude of respect, and that individuals will not protect what they don't respect. And so the Earth Charter's ethical vision is something that I think so desperately needs to be embedded in the ongoing climate negotiations. I'd say, secondly, the Earth Charter, the emphasis on the indivisibility and the interdependence of environmental protection, human rights, equitable human development, and peace, which all of you were referring to before. You know, 30 years ago, we were all, you know, or 25 years ago, I remember in Pecantico having these extraordinary drafting committee sessions discussing these issues, but they are absent from the climate change negotiations, the interdependence and the indivisibility. Stephen, you would be shocked. They really, really are. And you've always said, Stephen, you've talked about the false dichotomy of choosing the health of nature and the well-being of humanity. That false dichotomy is no longer an option for all the reasons that we know. The third way that I think the Earth Charter can really contribute is in the emphasis on new forms of partnership. And again, you highlighted, Stephen, that no single nation, state, or community can achieve climate, climate action alone, but we need a new spirit and a new ethos of global interdependence and universal responsibility, which, in the words of the Earth Charter, talks about global, which promotes our responsibility to one another, to the greater community of life, and to future generations. Now, what seems so natural to us who've been involved in the Earth Charter, I mean, for me, it's been several years, but these are principles that are so absent and silent in the most important intergovernmental negotiations of our time. So I just wanted to share those reflections with my very, very dear friends who I love so much.
Yes, Johanna, wonderful to see you, and thank you for that.
Yeah, I think your points are so well taken, and it's partly because Stephen keeps emphasizing science, rationalism, and technology has driven the action. And Gus Speth has said for years, we've got science, we've got policy, we've got technology, we've got law, and so on, but we don't have the transformative ethical and spiritual dimensions. And that's because it is marginalized in academia. And if you start with academia marginalizing, of course it's going to go into these international negotiations. Completely on the margin. UNEP has a section called Faith for Earth. Iyad Abu-Mogli is doing a great job, but he knows that even the presence there at COP meetings is always marginalized. In the Dubai one, they had the first Faith for Earth pavilion because they thought the Pope was going to come there. And that was a new watershed. But it is going to take really articulate leaders, religious leaders, and others to integrate this much more powerfully. And the Earth Charter is absolutely a powerful instrument of doing this. So thank you for that intervention.
Thank you. Alide had raised the hand. We're also about to close, but also I want to bring the voice of Ron Engel, just posted a question here in the chat box. And I'll bring you, Alide. Ron Engel say, well, Pam, I think your question is absolutely central. How do we bring about the political and social transformation that is essential to embody the Earth Charter vision? So that comes from Ron Engel. And thank you, Ron, for making that point. I don't know if any one of you want to comment on this before we bring in Alide?
Well, I would, Ron, and great to hear from you, Ron. I would call your attention to the Great Transition Initiative, which I think you know, that's led by Paul Raskin, and they are just announcing the Great Transition Campaign, which is focused on creating a global citizens movement to drive social change. And of course, this is an enormously complex subject that the Great Transition Initiative Dialogue has been exploring and talking about for many years, but they're finally going to try to pull this off. Now, I don't know how successful they will be, but just Google Great Transition Campaign or Great Transition Initiative, and you'll get the update on this. It's just being launched. I mean, that's one initiative that's trying to do this. But of course, this has got to go on in every country and every culture throughout the world, and there's no simple formula. And in the US right now, the Democratic Party seems quite lost. So this is a very complicated challenge.
Alide?
Yes. Well, I also like to remind the words of Wangari Maathai, also in the book Earth Charter in Action, when she said, well, she didn't say it there, but her slogan is, I will be a hummingbird. And I think it refers to the way forward in the Earth Charter, saying every individual, family, organization, and community has a vital role to play. The arts, sciences, religions, educational institutions, media, business, non-governmental organizations, and government are all called to offer creative leadership. And I think if we could open the Earth Charter now, we would add young people, the young generation here. They are implied in every individual, every family, but young people, as we speak, we have Jane Kilonzo among us now. Next week we'll have Elizabeth Waituti at our +25 event, who founded the Green Generation Initiative in her country, Kenya, to plant trees in the footsteps of Wangari Maathai. Young people are the majority in some of our societies now, and have not a big voice to speak. And I think the Earth Charter International courses and leadership offerings are very important to strengthen that voice. So next week, when we celebrate 25 years Earth Charter in the Netherlands, we're very happy that a big part of that group of people who come together, some 300 people have registered now, will be of the younger generation. And that is hopeful. And I think it's very important, because even without knowing the background of every word in the Earth Charter, reading the text for them is already inspiring. We've come across young people who don't know the history of the Earth Charter, but are inspired because you can feel the depth of the text. And Stephen, I remember before you said the last point of the Earth Charter text, you shared it with a young girl and asked her to read it. And then she came back to you and said, I didn't know that adults could write this beautiful text. Remember that? You shared that story sometimes.
Yes, I do. And another young girl that I gave the Earth Charter to read burst into tears. Maybe this is the same young woman. And then
it's happening every day. We come across young people who find us on the website, find us on the internet. Maybe you remember Sylvanus Murray from Sierra Leone, who just found the Earth Charter on the internet and started a program for youngsters who were child soldiers to give them a perspective based on the Earth Charter without knowing really the history of it. So both are important. I think we should deepen this dialogue, as is mentioned in the way forward. There's a lot of wisdom to share, but I also like to repeat the new slogan of the Earth Charter, since we have this new communication strategy, turning conscience into action. And that's, I think the people will gather in the +25 event are all going to share the way they've translated the Earth Charter principles in action. An example is Willem Verweda with Common Land. We have Leon Poa among us with Drinkable Rivers. People work on drinking water, on restoration. I think the word regeneration is also an important word now in the field of agriculture, in the field of food, to regenerate. It can be internally, it can be with the landscape among us. So how to do this in a thoughtful way is what we're going to try and do next week. And we will have an intergenerational assembly, an intergenerational dialogue. And this is really important because there are young people from conflict countries in conflict who manage to come to the Netherlands, want to learn also from the elderly. So my last words are that we're happy that some of the Earth Charter commissioners can come, still come. Severin Suzuki will be in the Netherlands, Abraham Soetendorp will be there, and Pauline Tangiora with Miriam, and many others who are new, but to have their wisdom with us is, I think, the lifeline with the commission, the historic commission. You are both very close connected to, and thank you for this heritage.
Leda,
Thank you,
thank
Anita.
you for that, and thank you for all the years of support that you've given the Earth Charter Initiative. You've been a wonderful leader in this whole movement, and we really appreciate it, and it's great to see you again.
And maybe one practical note, 2nd of July, the meeting is in the Peace Palace again, and there you can follow it online. You can go to the website of the Peace Palace. So for all those who cannot come, unfortunately, Peter, for instance, you had planned to come, you couldn't. You can follow through the website because that day is a plenary day. So all of you who want to do that, go to the website of the Peace Palace and you can log in and listen in to what is happening. Of course, many things are happening informally as well, but it's nice there. Akpesi will give a keynote, Severin will speak, we have panel discussions. So hopefully you can all be part of it in a way.
And it will be
maybe
recorded, right? Be recorded?
That will also be recorded, yeah.
Great.
let me make a comment on what Johanna Bursten brought to us about the climate change and the COP30. Alida shared here in the chat box a position paper on Earth Charter International. We do see a kind of window of opportunity to bring in at least the Earth Charter voice within this sphere, huge sphere and complicated sphere of COP30, because the president of COP30 made a call for a global ethical stock take, and they are already referring to Laudato Si as an ethical compass to address challenges of climate change. And we want to bring in the Earth Charter also alongside the Laudato Si and other ethical references to help expand the conversation around the COP30, looking at the ethical dimensions of how to address a kind of nurturing or how to say feeding in or contributing to these questions that the president of COP30 has raised on what are the challenges or the ethical dimensions of how we address the challenges of climate change. I mean, they already opened the window. We just want to position their shadows as a comprehensive instrument into that. And Alida shared here in the chat box that position paper. So Johanna, any help for anyone who is listening to us here in how to flag this and bring this to the process, we certainly highly appreciate that. So friends, we are coming to a close because of time. But I would like to invite Stephen and Mary Evelyn to offer us a last reflection and thought and on our conversation today in terms of efforts to bring Earth ethics and intergenerational justice. And I wanted actually, before I do that, as I did, inviting nature to our conversation through our imagination, the water, the air, trees, the birds, the butterflies, the hummingbirds, the birds, and many other elements from nature, but also add now the future generations into our imagination now and our sense of responsibility with them. So anyway, let's just pause for a few seconds to think about these various dimensions of how we expand our notions of care and respect. Okay, so Mary Evelyn, would you like to share some final reflections?
Well, very briefly, but it looked like Ron wanted to say something. So, well, I just am going to give a really quick shout out to everyone here, and then Ron would love to hear from you. But you know, many thanks. But I also want to. Cami Davis has put in the webinar chat 2 things that are coming up. One is the Universe Oratorio, Sam Guanaccia, that's going to be in the area of Saratoga Springs, which celebrates the universe in magnificent ways. So that's actually on July 18th. But then also on September 7th, Sam Cromwell has been working with others for an Earth Charter 25th celebration, and John and I will be there, and Gus Beth will be there. I think maybe Bill McKibben will be there, and it looks like Peter's nodding his head. So anyway, I think that's going to be a wonderful thing in Shelburne Farms near Burlington in Vermont, and we're grateful for these 2 celebratory events ahead. Ron, would you like to say something?
Very quickly, yes, thank you so much. It's a real blessing to be in the company of this community, and Miriam for keeping the flame alive for 25 years and all that you have done, Mary Evelyn and Stephen, of course. It brings back so many blessed memories. But I would say that we need, my message at this point would be that we are in a power struggle such as humankind has never experienced. And that means bringing to bear all the persuasive, all the imaginative, all the ideals and the traditions and the hopes and wisdom of the planet, as I think has been borne witness by the discussion today. But it's also a struggle for the power of political governance. And the Earth Charter for me has increasingly become the possibility, it could and should, I think, be a covenant among those citizens who are seeking, in fact, like the GTI movement that Stephen mentioned, to form a global democratic Earth democracy movement. And that is going to take political organization at a level that only, I think, a covenant, which is one's ultimate commitment to one another and to the earth itself, and ultimately, of course, to the mystery of being itself, which cradles everything we do, if that level of commitment, which is so evident in the lives of everyone here on this webinar, could be the a galvanizing force for transformation that the planet so desperately needs.
Thank you, Ron. And thank you for bringing this idea of Earth democracy, global democratic Earth democracy into our minds. Stephen, any final comments?
Yes, I want to, first of all, thank Ron for those very thoughtful comments. And Ron, I've always deeply appreciated your focus on covenant relationships, and that American democracy involves this covenantal relationship. And you're suggesting that this Earth Charter initiative should embrace that same spirit. And I think that's absolutely right. I do like the term spiritual democracy. And I was drawn to it initially during my graduate studies at Columbia when a Festschrift for Professor Blau was published called Spiritual Democracy and something else. I forget exactly what. But again, it's getting down to that spiritual level of commitment that is so very, very important, in the covenantal sense of being connected by those kind of bonds. So I want to thank all of you for coming to this event and for keeping the Earth Charter flame burning and being together and continuing to work together. And for me, my relationship with all of you has always been a deeply rewarding one. And I've had a sense that the Earth Charter Network was kind of my spiritual community. So thank you all for being who you are and what you're doing. And may the Great Spirit bless you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you everyone who took the time to be with us. For many, it's late. We have had people here from Kenya, from Ethiopia, from Azerbaijan, from Holland, many from Brazil, from Mexico, Canada, US, and many other countries. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you'll keep connected with us. We're always looking for stories to learn how the Earth Charter has inspired you and what you have been doing with that. Stephen and Mary Evelyn, our gratitude.
And to you,
Thank you
Miriam,
very much.
and Alida.
Thank you all.
And
Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Joanna.
Take care.
Well, everybody.